Okay, good morning, everybody. Are you able to hear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So let's get started with what we are discussing. And today, at the end, we'll complete 5 minutes earlier, 7 minutes earlier. We'll have a mock test today. The mock test, as the name says, the marks will not be considered. The purpose of the test is to check whether the test is on the team is working well and to familiarize yourself with the test and the teams, the quiz basically, and see if there are any glitches so that we'll take corrective action. And the marks will not be considered, excepting that we will announce the names of all who get 100% in this mock test. Basically, the test is based on what you already know, not specifically on what you have learned on this course. And maybe those who get 100%, maybe we'll just consider them for the teacher's mark, but not for the actual mark. Okay, I didn't disable movement, so somebody is moving the slides. Okay, let's get started.
Hello.
Yes, anybody wants to tell anything?
Sir, can you please make us all attendees? Someone is continuously removing people from the.
Yeah. So I go to the participants and then how do I make all attendees? I can make one person attendee, but how do I make all attendee? Anybody knows? Okay, let me just try here.
So you're muted.
Okay. Okay. So let's proceed. Are you able to hear? Are you able to hear?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir, people are being removed from the call.
Oh, why is it happening like this? So why are they getting removed? I don't know. Somebody is removing or what? Okay. So let's proceed in the meanwhile. Okay. First is the exercise. Based on what we have done in the last class, please try this exercise. A CPU is redesigned, and the objective of this redesign is to reduce power consumption. And what we did was we reduced the capacity load by 15%. We reduce the voltage by 15%. 20%. So by how much will the power consumption reduce? The same CPU, we just did 3 alterations.
आज मेरे को
Somehow,
क्यूजी लेना है इन बच्चों का मेन कंटेंट ही मेरा है
are you able to hear? Yeah, somehow we reduced the capacitive load by 15%. This is the parasitic capacitance. And we reduced 15% voltage and 15% frequency. By how much will power consumption reduce for this processor? We had looked at power consumption model last class. So based on this, can somebody do this? I mean, request all of you to do this, but can somebody give the answer?
Is it 48% or something?
Okay, let's look at it. This is the one that we had discussed last time, that the power consumption is proportional to the parasitic capacitance and square of the voltage and the frequency of operation. Now we have reduced the capacitive load by 15% and the voltage by 15% and the frequency by 15%. And if you compute this, you will get the power new by power old is 52.52. But then it is hard to reduce the voltage, and it's difficult to reduce the power, remove the power that is getting produced. I've tried everything, heat sink, fan, and so on, coolant, liquid. So if we can't really increase the number of transistors, we can't increase the frequency and so on, how do we improve the performance? Let's look at the answer for that. If we recapture the chip manufacturing process, in the year 2000, we used a 65 nanometer process. So the feature size was 65 nanometer. See this data, please let us, in all this course, not only this course, other courses, let us learn to distinguish between data, information, and concepts. The data like 65 nanometer, etc., don't require you to remember. If you remember, you are burdening your memory, the actual concept you will not be able to understand. So this is just for illustration or information for your knowledge. Don't have to remember. Just to understand the higher level information content in what we are giving, that it is reducing year after year and so on. So from 65 nanometer, it became 45 nanometer, 32 nanometer in 2010, 14 nanometer. And it has become comparable to the diameter of an atom, which is of 0.1 nanometer. So the feature size about 100 atom thick. And we had discussed about the problems that this causes when we narrow it down to such a small extent. And decade back, it was 500 nanometer. In 1971, it was 10 micron or 10,000 nanometer. Initially, see here, the reduction of the feature size was year after year, it substantially dropped. If we see the reduction of feature size year after year, the drop has almost saturated. We can't reduce the feature size further. It's creating a lot of difficulty. So getting speed or performance by reducing the feature size appears very restricted. Can do that in the years to come. Manufacturing process, we had seen about the dies, the wafer, and how these are aged. Some basic knowledge, we did not really, this is discussed in a VLSI design course, VLSI course. Here we just need to have an overall idea of what goes in to manufacture the dies. Now, if we can't really increase the performance by having more transistors, how do we improve the performance? The performance improvements in 1980s have come from architectural and organizational innovations. One important landmark event we had marked was the RISC architecture, 1984. And we'll see that how these architectural and organizational innovations have really made the computer what it is. And that's the focus of this course. But before we get started with all these architectural and organizational issues, just asking this question, that what is the difference between computer architecture and computer organization? Are these the same terms, or is there any difference between them? Traditionally, architecture means the instruction set architecture. This is the programmer visible part of the processor. The programmer needs to know what are the instructions that are supported by the processor. What are the registers? Especially the assembly level programmers need to know the registers. We will write small assembly programs as part of this course. And you will see that these are the things that you need to know. Instruction set, the registers, the addressing modes, the subroutine calls, etc. On the other hand, organization is the high level design. That is, how many caches are there? Is it 3 level L1, L2, L3? How many L1 caches? How many arithmetic and logic units? What type of pipelining, control design? So these are the internals of the hardware. This is the high level design. And if we look at the detailed design, that will be at the logic gate level. The high level design is also known as the microarchitecture of the processor. So this is the typical distinction between the architecture is the programmer visible part of the processor, instruction set, register, addressing modes, etc. And the organization is details of the hardware, the high level design like how many caches, etc. And this is called as the organization or the microarchitecture. This is the typical uses of the term. The origin of this term comes from Amdahl, Blau and Brooks. Long back in 1964, they used this term. He had written the attributes of a processor as seen by the programmer, the conceptual structure and functional behavior as distinct from the organization of the data flows and controls, the logic design and the physical implementation. So see here, the processor as seen by the programmer. So that's from there the uses of architecture has come. But we'll see that over the years, the uses has diluted. It means more. We'll just see that. Now let's look at the instruction set architecture. This is the aspects of the processor that the assembly language programmer must know. At the end of this course, you will all be able to write assembly language code. That is one of the small objectives of this course. Other than knowing the architecture and organization, we will be able to write small assembly programs. The architecture of the family of computers, like Intel is bringing out processor after processor every year. So they are the processors of the same family and they have the same architecture or the instruction set architecture. They run the same assembly language program. the Intel was in a very difficult place actually, because they had a bad instruction set architecture called as the CISC. They wanted to change it, but this principle that the family of computers should have the same architecture prevented them from changing it. Can anybody tell that what will be the problem if the instruction set architecture for Intel is changed? I mean, they wanted to change it, but they could not.
Memory decoding format would also have to be changed.
Okay, but I mean, what will be the problem? I mean, if that needs to be changed, they will change it.
Portability of the programs
are in assembly language, so the compiled programs couldn't work between
So
different
please tell your name.
architectures.
Archit, is it? Archit?
Yes, sir.
What's your answer?
So the compiled programs are in assembly language, so they wouldn't work between different architectures.
Okay, see, the compiled programs are in machine language. Okay.
Yeah.
That is one correction. But the problem that they face is that the old programs, see, there are several programs called as legacy over last decades have been developed. And if you bring out a new processor, all those will stop working.
Sir, compatibility issue would be there.
Yeah. So compatibility. If your program that was working, now you say that it will not work, people will get angry. They will not buy that. So that's the reason that forced, and we'll see that they had to do some internal changes. They made externally CISC, internally RISC. That we'll see as we proceed. But they could not change the instruction set architecture. And architecture leads to the notion of binary compatibility. So that means that a program, executable program that is working, see, when you buy many of the software you buy as executable code, they don't give you source code and ask you to compile. Rarely. They will give you executable code. Now that executable code, if it is working on one processor and also working on another processor, then they are binary compatible. The processors belonging to the same family of computers are compatible, binary compatible. And just to digress a little bit, Intel originally had a competitor, Motorola. Both of them had almost dominated the processor market. And sometime Motorola 68,000 processor was so popular that Intel was getting pushed. But when the innovations were taking place, pipelining and so on, somehow Motorola did not do it. It just continued with the same architecture, 68,000. But we'll see as part of this course that Intel, they tried to assimilate or use this pipelining in their processor. Initially, they came up with a very ugly pipeline actually, but still they used it and slowly they started to develop. And you know what happened? In a couple of years, Microsoft semiconductor division was bankrupt. Nobody purchased. So the Motorola closed the semiconductor division, and Intel was almost like de facto manufacturer. But then a new competitor appeared. Anybody knows the name of the new competitor? AMD, Advanced Micronic Devices or something, but they changed their name to AMD. And they brought out processor which has the same instruction set architecture as the Intel. The instruction set architecture is not copyrighted. Somebody can produce a processor with exactly same instruction set architecture. And they did exactly that. AMD produced processors which are binary compatible with Intel. You can just take out the Intel processor on your motherboard and fix the AMD processor. Almost that simple, it will work. And AMD had the advantage because they didn't have this legacy CISC to RISC and all that. We'll discuss all that story later. But then now the main competition is between AMD and Intel, and also the ARM that we'll see as we proceed in this course. Now the instruction set architecture, as we said, defines what the assembly language programmer need to know. We'll first discuss about the instruction set architecture because we are going to do assembly programming. And family of computers, same architecture, run the same assembly language program. Now, the instruction set architecture, once it is defined, the compiler writers, they write compiler using that instruction set, and the application programmer write here programs. On the other hand, based on the instruction set, the hardware designers, they design the processor. And this instruction set we can consider as an abstraction of the hardware. Now let's look at the advantages of this abstraction. First is that the instruction set architecture, once we define it, lasts for generation. Like we saw that Intel processors over last 30-40 years using the same instruction set architecture. So program running 40 years back, the executable code also runs now. That is portability. Used in many different processors like AMD, Intel, Motorola, etc. in same instruction set architecture. Generality. It provides convenient functionality to the higher level. The compiler writer knows that what instruction set he will produce code, and therefore it becomes convenient for him. And once you know the instruction set architecture is formalized, the hardware designer can have efficient implementation of that instruction set architecture. So this is a very fundamental thing, the instruction set architecture, and we're going to discuss that first. But one thing is that even though we distinguished between architecture, organization, and hardware details, but over the years, they are being loosely used. Architecture nowadays not only implies instruction set architecture, it also implies organization. I mean, some writers and engineers, they use these terms, instruction set architecture, organization, and hardware, but they use the term architecture to imply these. So sometimes the term is used loosely. Now look at this desktop. We have this motherboard on which you can identify the processor here from its heatsink, and there will be a fan on top of it. There are extension cards here. You can attach extension cards, and then this is the monitor and the keyboard. And then there is the hard disk, CD-ROM, etc. But then asking this question here, that how are these different components connected by buses? Are these all tied together, all these components, the processor, the memory, the cache, the display, the keyboard, the hard disk, network? So can we draw a schematic diagram to show how different components of a computer are connected by buses? So that is the most fundamental model of a computer at this level that we must be aware of. Sometimes in Vivas, etc., we ask this question, that can you please draw a schematic diagram to show how the different important components of a computer are connected by buses? And in the Vivas, we have heard very strange answers. Some have drawn like different components and then drawn lines between them, fully connected and so on. And some even refer to this box as the CPU. I think some school book or somewhere they call this as the CPU. But the CPU is sitting here. That's the processor. The box is not the CPU. Sometimes in the school books, etc., they write bit misleading. And this is the computer box here, and the CPU is here under the heatsink. Now, how do we draw this diagram? And I'll just show you the diagram and we'll discuss little bit of that, but that's a very important diagram. All our course and all architecture courses, etc., they will all adhere to this. There are small improvements we'll discuss on this that has happened, but then this is the overall organization of a computer. The processor chip contains the cache. Cache is not anywhere outside. In the present day, the cache is inside the processor, and that's the CPU. And the main memory is here, and there is a processor memory bus using which the RAM or the main memory is connected to the CPU. And there are these IO devices, displays, keyboard, etc. They are connected by a controller. And even the network card is connected by a controller to something called as a peripheral bus. And there is an adapter between these two. So asking this question is that what is the role of this adapter? What is the role of the controller? What is the difference between a processor memory bus and a peripheral bus? Can't we have just one bus? So 3 questions I asked. Let me repeat the questions. What is the role of the controller? What is the role of the adapter? What is the difference between processor memory bus and peripheral bus? Can't we just have a single bus? So can anybody answer any of these questions?
Hello.
Yes, Abhijay, please tell your answer.
So the controller is something that basically manages the flow of data between like 2 devices inside the computer.
I mean, what do you mean by manages?
So like it will direct the flow like from which should be like the input and from to where like the data would be transferred. So that is managed by the controller. Like the input device will provide the input and that is sent to the peripheral bus, and from there it will be further sent to the processor end.
And what about the adapter?
So the adapter, I am not very sure.
Okay, so let me, anybody wants to give answer?
Hello, sir.
Multiple buses
Sohini,
can actually help
yes,
in-
please, your answer.
Yes, sir. Sir, we have got 2 sets of buses.
Yes.
So someone is muting me whenever I'm
Oh.
going to speak.
See, this is a problem in this online. I don't know how to control it. So anyway, let's proceed.
Sir,
So-
we have
Sir, does the controller store value taken by the input for a momentarily such that when CPU is free, controller can send the data to CPU? So it stores the value for
not really. See, let me just tell about this. The questions that I asked, let me try to answer. See, the first thing is that the processor memory bus is a very high speed bus. Because between the memory and the processor, data gets transferred at a very high speed. And you can transfer data at a very high speed by something called as a synchronous bus. A synchronous bus is driven by clock. So there is a high frequency clock. See, these memory modules, RAM chips, etc., they have their clock rating. So the data gets transferred exactly at that clock rating. And if your processor memory bus has some rating, you have to use the memory of the same rating. Now, this is a synchronous bus. But look at here, the display, keyboard, IO devices, printers, etc. The hard disk, they all transfer data at various rates, and these are often very slow devices. So sometimes they will send, then there will be a lot of time they will not send, and again they will send, and that is very slow. So that is handled by something called as a asynchronous bus. This processor memory is a synchronous bus, clock driven. The peripheral bus is asynchronous. Here, only when some request comes, it handles, there is no clock. Whenever request comes, it gets transmitted. The controller has buffers because see, it not only has to issue some commands to the different devices of different commands that start unit, actually that will not discuss here, and they control this, the devices, when to send, what speed, and buffer where they can store and send to peripheral bus, etc. The adapter is here because this is the synchronous bus and this is the asynchronous bus. Data is getting transmitted high speed on here. So when the CPU sends data high speed, somebody has to buffer that before sending to peripheral bus. It has to send it at its own speed on the peripheral bus. On the other hand, when the data is sent from the peripheral bus towards the CPU, it also stores data, and then once it has sufficient data, it sends it at high speed to the CPU. So there are two buses here, processor memory bus, peripheral bus connected by adapter. The processor memory bus is a high speed bus. The peripheral bus is a lower speed bus. And all these devices, displays, keyboard, hard disk are attached through controllers to the peripheral bus, even the network card. So this is the fundamental diagram that how these are connected. And over the years, there are small changes that have occurred. Definitely we discuss that in a higher level course, but this I don't know, maybe we'll just discuss this only. But through all our discussions, we'll assume that this kind of organization of the computer's main components. Anybody has any question here?
Sir, which one is acting as the local buffer?
See, this adapter has buffer in it because this is a very high speed bus. Okay. Now it cannot really communicate at that speed with the peripheral bus. As it sends lot of data, adapter stores them in its local buffer and sends it a lower speed on the peripheral bus. Similarly, on the transfer from peripheral bus to the memory bus side, because this is a high speed bus, it can transfer very quickly. So it accumulates some data here and then only transfers here. Similarly, the controller has also some buffer because it is dealing with devices, and then it which may be working at a very slow rate or maybe fast rate. So it does some buffering before sending it on the peripheral bus. So the buffers are there on the adapter and also on the controller. Any other questions?
So could you please once again explain why are controllers and the network card shown separately? Like for network components?
See the net. Okay, why there are two different controllers? Is it?
No. Why the controller and the network card are shown separately in that one?
See, network card is not the controller. See, network card is only manages the protocol issue. Once the data comes here, the network card converts it to the appropriate protocol like Ethernet or wireless or whatever. In your laptop, you will find that there are different network cards like wireless, Ethernet, and so on. So the controller only sends data here, requesting it to send or it requests to receive, and the network card takes care of the protocol aspects, converts to Ethernet or wireless, etc., So that lower level aspects called as the level 0, even the higher level up to I think third level, it takes care. Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Level 1, level 2 of the ISO protocol is inbuilt into the network card. So as we proceed, it will become clear, but this is the important diagram. Now, let's do a quiz, small quiz. That program, see, this quiz is not based on what we discussed, but this is on general knowledge. Consider a program in which the memory access, so that means that you are accessing memory. As when you execute, you have to get data, write data into the memory. The processor gets data from the memory and writes data, and that constitutes 40% of the execution time. And that data is obtained from the RAM actually. So this execution time, 40% of the execution time is determined by the RAM. And we decided to replace the RAM with a faster one, and now memory access is 10 times faster. So how much speed up?
56%.
How fast will the program execute?
56%. 56%.
56?
Percent. So if
56%.
Mohsin, right? Who is answering? Mohsin, right?
so it was
Ambuj. Sorry, somebody is, I see this is the online, there's a problem that somebody is muting.
So actually, a lot of people are answering, but there's a delay.
so it was Vipul.
Okay, Vipul, yes, Vipul, you are saying 56%, is it? Okay, let's see the answer. The execution time 40% is enhanced. So 0.4 is enhanced, and it is enhanced by 10 times. So 0.4 what it was taking will now take 0.04. Okay, so 56%. That's the correct answer. I hope everybody is okay with this. The speed up is defined as if 1 was the original time that it used to take. Now 60% there is no change. This is represented by this factor 1 minus 0.4. 60% execution time, there is no change. And the other 40% is speeded up by 10, factor 10. So it is now taking 0.04. So what originally used to take 1 will take 0.64. And therefore, the speed up is defined as the old execution time divided by the new execution time. Old execution time is 1, now it is taking 0.64. So 56% is the speed up. But then how did we work this out? We considered that how much time, how much fraction is speeded up and so on, and that is expressed by something called as the Amdahl's law. Those who are appearing AGRE, these, that, etc., other exams or higher level courses, and even as part of this course, this we will refer again and again, the Amdahl's law. Simple concept. Most of you could work it out without knowing the law, very intuitive law, which says quantify the overall performance gain due to an improvement to some part of a computation. The speed up achieved from using some faster mode of execution is limited by the amount of time that enhancement is actually used. So the time for which the enhancement is not used, that remains the same, 60% remained the same, and 40% became 0.04. And this, the speed up is defined as execution time without enhancement by execution time with enhancement. Very intuitive. Most of you could work out without knowing this. So the one that has remained unaffected here, and this 40% is now taking only this much. So now it is taking this much time on the right side, and the left side is the original time. Very intuitive law. If we express that, it will become like this. that speed up is execution time old by execution time new by 1 minus fraction enhanced. This is the unchanged part, and this is the changed part for which it's taking less time now. But don't remember this formula I written here. Don't memorize this formula. We'll ask problems, but if you memorize, you will not be able to answer the questions. Just remember the concept. First exercise, we were using a floating point unit, and now the floating point unit is used only 10% of the execution time, and we have somehow made it 2 times faster. So what is the speed up? What is the, if we know the execution time new, we'll be able to compute the overall speed up. So anybody has any quick answers?
Sir, 5.3%.
Sir, 5.3%.
So 5.3%.
Okay, can hear a lot of answers.
5.3%.
So 5.3%.
5.3.
Okay, good, very good. Some of you are really fast, very impressed. Those did not do, don't get disheartened. Just look at here. Very simple thing. 0.9 is unchanged, and 0.1 is reduced by 2. So 0.95 and 1 by 0.95 is 5.3%. So we will just look at this and then stop here for the quiz today. And remember that Thursday we'll have a small quiz, and today is the mock quiz actually, just to get you used to how the quizzes will be conducted, and the marks are automatically computed. But then one thing need to say is that since we are doing in the teams, today is a 5-minute quiz, and we'll announce the start of the quiz through a chat. The TAs will help, they will write the quiz has started, and you can look at the top of your team's screen and select the quiz. And then at the end, because see, the Teams does not display a clock actually, so that's our difficulty. I mean your difficulty, that you don't know when it will stop, because after it stopped you cannot submit. So we'll also send before half a minute or a minute, half a minute, we'll send a chat. The TS will send you a prompt saying that it is going to end, please submit, please end. So that please look out for the chat, and we'll just take this up, and Thursday we'll have a 10-minute quiz, and we'll stop here. Please attend to the quiz, and Taisi, Jyoti, Taisi, are we ready for the quiz?
Yes, sir, we are ready.
Yes, sir.
Good. So we stop here, and please take the quiz. And this quiz, as I said, those who get 100% of this quiz will announce their names, and also in the teacher's evaluation part will consider those names. Otherwise, the mark will not be considered. Okay, best of luck.
Sir?
Yeah.
Sir, there are 2 quizzes. One is called quiz 1 and one is called mock test. Sir, which one to win? Sir, you are muted.
Your mic is on mute.
So today we have the computer architecture mock test.
Sir, that quiz is showing closed.
Jyoti, am I correct that today it is called as the mock test for computer architecture?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So it is the mock test for computer architecture. And tomorrow we'll have, on Thursday we'll have the quiz 1 for the computer architecture. For operating system, you'll have the separate ones. Okay, best of